Put away your notebooks, just leave your hands free. And this is it's a very, very silly exercise, but it's good for waking up. So let's get the rhythm. So what I'm gonna do is, let's keep on doing that rhythm. And Chava, I need you because you're the one who knows this exercise. Or do you know it?
Andrea knows it, or Becky knows it.
Andrea?
Chava,
Okay. So I'm gonna say my name twice, and then I'm gonna name somebody else, and that person is saying his or her name twice, and then name somebody else. Alright? So I'll do it with Andrea. Without losing the rhythm. And then very good, thank you. I think so far you've been the best group we've worked with this tool because they always get confused and you were right, you were awesome. So we're gonna start the plenary session with this exercise. It is very psychedelic, like the hippie times, you know. So we're gonna do three steps. First, you're gonna explain how you did it. Kind of, we started discussing, or each one started with its own plan, and then just tell us how you did it. Then the outcome, pointing out what you have here. And afterwards, we're gonna have observations and questions, right? So let's go and explain. This works. All right, Nicole, then.
So first, we're explaining the process, and then what we came up with. What's the three?
Like describing what you have there. That's the second. The third one is just questions and observations.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so the first thing we did is we had to choose a topic. So we had some discussion around the topic, and then each person went around and said what they thought would be a good topic, and we agreed on leadership development. And so then we talked about what we wanted to include, and the first things that we thought about were the three pieces that we had learned about from popular education, being research, and then education, and then action, knowing that we wanted to include all those things. And so then we started brainstorming. We didn't want to start putting, even though this looks like brainstorming, we didn't want to put the brainstorming on this sheet. So this is our brainstorming sheet of the types of things that we wanted to include. And then
Stop that sheet of framing.
yeah, and then once we had all of our sort of bits and pieces together, we decided sort of our order of operations. So what we wanted to do first, what we wanted to do next, how things would flow into each other. So that's sort of the process. So then what we have is, for leadership development, we decided that the first thing, when we're talking about leadership, it can be a pretty personal kind of discovery to learn about what makes us a good leader and what strengths that we have, sort of digging deeper. So we knew we wanted to create a safe space for people to be able to explore a little bit more deeply And so that's what this creating safe space to develop our leaders is about, because it requires digging in and vulnerability. So we wanted to do trust exercises with the whole group. We really liked that trust exercise that we did yesterday with leading and the hands. So that was something. And then we talked about wanting to do introductions. So number one, we would go around and say who we were and kind of a bit about our story. And then we wanted to do a name game so that we could learn each other's names. We liked the fruit basket approach. That was a good way to learn each other's names. And then doing the trust walk to gain each other's trust. That was sort of the whole opening section. And then we wanted to move into, from there a little bit. Oh, let's see. Stories? What ways do people exercise leadership? So, who have you known in your life that are leaders? These are sort of the stories that we're telling. Who have we known that are leaders? And then talking about naming the qualities of leadership as well. So within the stories, which is a group activity, who have we known, but then using the card kind of activity where you write down the different qualities of leadership on cards and then have everybody put those up on the wall so that everybody could kind of see what the whole group felt like were different qualities of leadership. And then to move in from there into personal inventories. And so the personal inventories were around learning about what is your own kind of personal leadership style, number one, what's your style of leadership? And number two, what strengths do you have? And the reason why we were talking about leadership strengths is because the idea that effective leadership is not necessarily that a person contains all strengths, because not every person is going to, no person is going to have all strengths, but that knowing what you do have, and then where also your areas of weakness are, you can start to surround yourself, you can build your teams of complementary qualities so that all those strengths are included in your team, but you don't necessarily have to hold all those things. So this was a personal inventory to determine those things. And then we're talking about that would take about 2 hours. Getting through kind of all of that would take about 2 hours. And so moving from there into taking a lunch break. Okay, and then we wanted to talk about during the lunch break, it would give the facilitators time to score the inventories so that you could see then what is your personal leadership style, what are your strengths. And then come back to the group and let's see, have the group describe each leadership style and sort of analyze how they're used for liberation leadership, what we're calling liberation leadership, because dictatorship, it was brought up to the group that dictatorship is a leadership style, but it's not necessarily a leadership style that's in line with liberation leadership. So having a discussion around that. And then identifying who in the group has each of the different styles, and qualities, and putting people together according to their leadership style so they could kind of see who was in the room. And then also having a way to identify what are those qualities that each person possesses, maybe wear that on your sleeve somehow, so that you could see who is in the room with which different qualities. And then maybe with color coding. And then we were talking about mixing up into complementary teams and exploring collaboration for the purpose of doing the group work, which is the action step. So before breaking out, though, we were talking about doing just a real quick kind of info on decision making, because there are lots of different ways to make decisions. But as a group is coming together, it's important for a group to maybe know how they want to proceed with making decisions so that every voice is heard. And so one thing that we talked about was just very simple, kind of like, yes, let's pass this, I agree with this. What was this one? I'm not going to block it?
Yeah.
And then this one is I block it.
Or I have questions.
I have questions. Okay, so yes, let's proceed. I have questions, or no, I'm blocking this. So that it's not just like a yes or no, but that everybody can have their voice heard. And then the action part, the group work, is that the groups choose a task. So one of the things we had to identify was what kind of group are we working with. Is this a group of people from one organization? Is this a group of people from multiple organizations? How is this going to work? So we decided for the purpose of planning this, that this was maybe a group of people from one organization. And so then the groups could break out and according to their complementary skill sets, and then choose a task that addresses a need of the organization. So they're actually producing something, planning something from that action time, and they would have to come up with that and then plan the steps and work together with understanding, you know, each of their different leadership styles, understanding each of their different strengths that they were bringing to the table. So the groups do the task. And then in once the small groups are done with that, we break out into the larger group again and analyze how the leadership worked during the task, like how did the different leadership styles work together? How did the different strengths get focused on together? Like who got to use their strengths? How all of that works, sort of analyze all of that. And then we wanted to talk about also how did it feel to step into your leadership style like that, to step into your power. Once you identified kind of like where your strengths were and where your leadership style was, how did it actually feel to move into that with this group work? And then finally have a closing that we really wanted to include evaluation in this, and so we felt like this also might be evaluation. So not just how did it feel, but how did this task work for you? Was this a task that made you feel like you were having the opportunity to exercise your leadership style and your leadership qualities as part of evaluation? And then the closing being, how do you plan to use this information and apply it to your work? So how are you going to take what you learned here today and bring it back to the work that you do within the organization?
All right, thank you. Could I use that design for my next workshop?
Don't be right.
So did you want to do a question?
Yes, now if somebody of the group would like to add something that is needed, something else
Well,
from the same
Tom
group?
brought out, so we try to work within the structure of research, education, and action too. And so that was sort of the way we figured out how to move through the flow of the workshop.
All right, so independently of the elements, that was like the main structure, right? Research, education, and action. Good. All right, questions, observations of the rest of the group? Tevin?
I have a few observations. The first one is visual. First, the fact that you use some color, which is very pedagogical. It's very good to use colors. I always say that the visuals are like food. It enters through the eyes. And I know I could be obsessive with this. People who work with me know that I'm a little obsessive about, no, you gotta keep the green color, but it helps a lot. So I'm really clear of the times, they're in orange. I'm really clear of the 3 moments of popular education, they're in black. So it's very good that you try to stick with some coding. So when we see it, we're able to see these aspects of the methodological design that sometimes have a lot of detail to it. So the first thing is format. I like that. I really liked that you followed a logic, because what happens in the most difficult part of creating a workshop, it's not the parts of the workshop, it's the logic. How do we consistently with popular education create a logic that flows with it coherently? That is the hardest part. Choosing the techniques and the tools is the easiest part, but making sense of what are we going to be researching from the folks that are going to be there? How are we going to be reflecting on that, which is the educational moment? And then how do we go back to practice? Sometimes that's not so easy to figure it out. So that's my second observation, and I see the flow really clear there. And then I had a third observation, which is that the second moment, which is the educational moment, the theoretical moment, sometimes the typical moment is like we did yesterday with PowerPoints and everything. It's not the best way. It's not the best way, and we all know, because people get tired. There's a lack of interaction, and sometimes people feel it's too academic kind of like. You guys are doing a theoretical reflection. You know the topics. You know how there's two kinds of leaderships, and you're bringing it up in the reflection. You don't have to use PowerPoints to do it. So I really like the way the second step is being conducted without having to rely strictly on PowerPoints to show some of the theoretical points that you want to cut across, right? Which are the qualities, some of the issues of leadership, the two models of dictatorship, etc. So I wanted to make that third observation, because it's easier to prepare PowerPoint sometimes than to just lead the conclusions on the group, and you were doing it that way on the second step.
Thank you.
It may be useful also, I should have said at the beginning, the people who were in the group were, we have Jackie, Alex, Amy, and Thomas. Yeah.
All right, thank you. But before going to the other, Julie, you had an observation, right?
Yeah, I just want to say I really liked that you included that second question of how did it feel to step into your leadership style. That was a great addition to just the analysis piece, because you can lose a lot in not asking specifically about how people felt.
Yes, that dynamic of this objective that is so important, and also the objective things. Yes, that's good. I would like to say that I've designed and implemented leadership trainings in different parts in Florida and other parts of the United States. And you know, it's interesting because this design looks like a lot like the ones we work with. It's very similar. And I think anybody could follow this design. Even people who weren't in the group could follow this design. The only thing that I would do, just if you're going to use this kind of signs, there are more, because I love the way that flows. It's not, linear or vertical. It flows. It's like, and that's education. It flows. It's not something linear. The only thing that I would do is kind of, besides the colors, probably using more these shapes, so that there will be more circles and all shapes, but it's wonderful. So
Like a mental match flow chart.
So both in content and format is beautiful. Yes.
I just wanted to add on to that. Like, initially when I took a look at it, it looks like a lot because it is moving in a different way that we're accustomed to. I'm about to say, I'm watching a lot of PowerPoints nowadays, with classes and stuff. But as Nicole went through it, and I was like, wow, it really felt good to just see it flow out the way it did. And then sitting here reflecting on what everyone was adding into the comments and stuff, I'm like, wow, it really reads well. Maybe there could be little adjustments here and there, but it's actually the information is really presented well right there. So, I think it's a really good job.
All right, something else, or can we move to the other group? So, please, congratulations to this group. Awesome. Okay, let's go to the middle. Let's move the controls and chairs. Have you gone to Disney World, Magic Kingdom? This is like the carousel of progress in the Magic Kingdom that you're going to. All right, so again, it's 3 steps. First of all, the topic, how you did it, the content, and then questions and observations.
Ok, bueno, nuestro grupo, cuando estábamos explorando sobre qué tema íbamos a hacer nuestro workshop, decidimos escoger transporte y estuvimos intercambiando opiniones y ideas, y nuestro objetivo para este workshop es entender cómo el transporte se relaciona con el poder. Eso es el tema. Después, nuestra primera actividad sería el rompehielo,
No, pero vamos a hacer un poco de cómo empezamos como a pensar en actividades, pero luego pensamos que necesitábamos hacer como una lógica, qué queríamos lograr con cada parte, hacia dónde queríamos llegar con el taller, y ya después que habíamos diseñado la lógica y las metas, volvimos al principio a crear actividades.
Ok, un punto muy importante ahí que nos ayudó Dorsel, y una muy buena idea es que nuestro grupo tendría que ser variado de acuerdo a las necesidades de nuestra comunidad, no solamente, por ejemplo, latinos que no tienen una licencia, pero sino también clase media trabajadora que no tiene los medios para transportarse, y también personas que escogen el transporte. O sea, hay personas que escogen, por ejemplo, manejar una bicicleta porque gustan hacerlo así. Entonces, ese es un punto y algo que me gustó mucho que aportó nuestra compañera Dorsel, que tenemos que tener un grupo variado. Ya empezamos con... Bueno, la primera actividad que quisimos hacer como para introducir el grupo es un rompehielo, haciendo un círculo con una actividad, por ejemplo, aplaudiendo, diciendo nuestro nombre y también actuando cuál es nuestro medio de transporte, ¿verdad? Después, el segundo paso, quisimos hacer una actividad como escrita, que cada persona en el taller escriba 24 horas de cómo es un día para ellos, como para transportarse, qué retos tienen y cuál es su, por ejemplo, su horario o todas las cosas que tienen que hacer para transportarse. Y ahí también, después de que escribieran, queríamos invitar a veces vemos en los talleres que mucha gente no tiene la habilidad de dibujar, por ejemplo, quizás conseguir a un voluntario que sí nos ayude con esto, y cada quien comparta sus 24 horas de reto, y el voluntario esté dibujando aquí, ¿no? Una bicicleta, y yo me transporto así, y haciendo, por ejemplo, bicicleta, un autobús, tu carro. Bueno, esa actividad nos emocionó. Después de que tuviéramos esto hecho con el artista y los dibujos, el tercer paso sería analizar las barreras de cada medio de transporte. Pero como tenemos 25 personas y el tiempo es quizás corto, íbamos a invitar a 3 personas que escribieran, sí, que pusieran, ahí ya me...
No, cada quien iba a tener papelitos.
Ajá.
Donde pudieran identificar las barreras que ven con cada medio de transporte y pegar los papelitos ahí.
Abajo de los dibujitos que hizo el artista.
Porque pensamos que cada comunidad tiene diferentes barreras y queríamos que todos conocieran las realidades de todas las comunidades.
Entonces, ahí, por ejemplo, las personas que sintieran que no está escrito aquí su necesidad, entonces nada más que dijera, esto no lo están considerando, y que lo hablara, para que así no tomemos todo el tiempo del taller en ir persona por persona explicando cada cosa. Entre ahí, nosotros somos como que un taller bien rápido, solamente 10 minutos de descanso, muy trabajadores. En el paso número 4, queríamos ver los patrones y las reflexiones haciendo un cuchicheo, que nos encantó en este taller, y dando un tiempo como para hacer grupitos y que cada quien hiciera ese cuchicheo. Y esa fue la idea de Julie. Y el paso número 5 es también, queríamos hacer pequeños grupos, ponerlos como que a ver qué soluciones puede haber a corto y a largo plazo. Entonces ahí que iban a ser 2 grupos, corto plazo, largo plazo, con 3 papelógrafos del individuo, de la comunidad, que se podría hacer con la comunidad, y del sistema. Y si quieres agregar algo ahí.
Entonces, por ejemplo, en grupo de corto plazo va a ver qué pueden hacer individualmente a corto plazo para vencer su barrera, qué pueden hacer como comunidad y qué pueden exigir al sistema, ya que sea económico o político, para eliminar la barrera. Y también en grupo de largo plazo con los mismos 3 ejemplos, qué es lo que quieren hacer a largo plazo en su vida individual, como comunidad, y qué quieren cambiar en los sistemas.
Y,
sí, que después nada más volver al grupo en general para compartir las ideas de corto plazo y largo plazo, porque la idea que teníamos es que ese taller era como el inicio de una campaña para hacer un plan de acción para mejorar el transporte. Entonces ya la próxima junta fuera plan de acción, pero queríamos empezar con una junta de análisis. Y para cerrar, íbamos a explicar que para la próxima vez nos íbamos a ver para hacer el plan de acción, y para cerrar hacer un círculo y que cada quien dijera algo nuevo que aprendieron, ya que fuera acerca de la realidad de otra persona, una nueva idea, etc.
Y también un propósito muy grande, otra vez digo que esto lo aportó Dorcel, es cómo, esto lo hicimos pensando aquí en nuestra comunidad, cómo nuestra comunidad puede variarse, y las mismas, por ejemplo, yo como latino, que no puedo tener una licencia para conducir, puedo quizás apoyar a alguien de clase trabajadora que no tiene para el transporte, y al mismo tiempo ella me va a apoyar para hacer lo mío, y quizás podemos apoyar a otro afroamericano, todos para apoyar a la misma persona para un fin, y sería recíproco. Este es el gol de nuestro taller, y lo quisimos hacer pensando en eso. Y Julia está emocionada porque quiere que venga a ese taller. ¿A dónde vamos a ir a hacer?
Ya estoy.
Sí. Y después de todo, invitar a la gente que viene para el próximo taller. Quizás vamos al próximo taller, hablamos, porque estamos comentando de quizás para solucionar el problema a corto plazo es quizás poner unos taxis ahí la comunidad, o alguien que tiene licencia, tratar la manera de qué hora va la persona al trabajo, o qué hora va a recoger a sus bebés, o qué hora van al laundromat o a comprar, entonces van todos juntos, y a largo plazo quizás hablar con la gente.
Hacer cambiar el sistema de justicia, quizás para la otra comunidad, por ejemplo, para nosotros como inmigrantes, y para ayudar a nuestros otros compañeros que quizás no tienen el medio económico, pero buscar una idea de cómo van a estirar ese dinerito, su economía, o apoyarnos mutuamente. Esa es la idea.
Wonderful. Great. Is there something else, or what? Julie, do you have something else to add?
Well, sure, yeah. I think my favorite part of our process was when we were trying at the very beginning to figure out what we wanted to do it on, and kind of like came up with the idea of, well, I think someone said it should be an issue that we all have a lot of experience with. And so then it was like interesting to like see who's around the table and be like, okay, what do we all have experience with? And I kind of threw out transportation, thinking about my experiences. And then it was like, oh, okay, well, you know, but we don't know how we're going to do that because these are the experiences that these people have, these are the experiences that these people have. And then that was like the lightning moment of like, oh wait, we all have different experiences and barriers around transportation, but we all have this thing we have to deal with. And then that was kind of what triggered the idea of we're analyzing our relationship with power. It's about transportation, but ultimately it's about the way like different communities are experiencing this one, you know, institution in our lives. So that was like cool to me about the way that kind of developed.
All right, Basilio, are you? You're fine?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. So, comments, questions to this group? Cool. All right. What else? Something that this group did some kind of differently than the other group, or something new that they added in their design?
I like that. This is I think one way to sort of frame an issue and look at it in a way that everybody has different barriers, like you're saying, the ways that y'all brought that out to then come say, this is something we actually all have in common. Because I think oftentimes what happens is that we name things at one level, and so then we're pitted against each other or segregated off in our own little groups. And so I like the way that y'all were able to raise that we have differences, but actually it's all this relationship to this one system, and how that sort of works out for us. And then I think how y'all sort of led in the looking at short-term community solutions and then longer term. I really liked how you did that, because I think that's sometimes things we miss. We do one or we're doing the other, but not doing them together, which I think is a real nice concert.
All right.
It's like deja vu to me, because I took the Just Economics leadership training, which was the first one, and out of our class project was to deal with transportation.
So, Reka, I have a question and a few comments. So the first question.
Let me ask first if somebody else has
Yes.
another comment or question before we go with Jared.
I think it was out of the box kind of situation. I liked the fact that they just came up with something on their own. I mean, it was just totally fresh, you know. It wasn't, and it's so simple, and the fact that it's so simple written, that means they can be flexible, and as they go through the process, they can change things. And that's, I thought that was part of the popular education too, to be so flexible that allow the participants to change the agenda, you know, like sort of you did yesterday.
All right, good. Thank you. Alan?
So my first question is, I think you went over at the beginning of the explanation about the logic, and I'd like for you to maybe reiterate it again, and then I have some comments.
Miriam, do you want to post it? I just keep ignoring you.
The one that was like the arrow?
Oh. That was like our framework.
Because we have the objective. Is
Yeah,
that what
yes,
you want
we
to
should
see?
But you kind of went over either the objectives or the logic, but I didn't catch it, and so I'd like to see it now after seeing the steps.
We have the logic. Of course, I drew the objective word, but it was like get to know each other.
I basically wrote, that's basically what I wrote on this sheet. Actually.
That's all this was.
Yeah, it was like getting to know each other and then sharing our experiences to create a shared analysis and identify patterns and then come up with solutions.
Okay, great, wonderful. So then I have 3 comments that I think are, so we could be learning from the one group or the other. In terms of format, again, I agree with Mehran. The fact that it's so, the letters are so big, they're very easy to see. When you're doing a plenary, you have to use capital letters or the biggest that you can, because if not, there's no point of using butcher paper. So this is very clear, very pedagogical too. So, and then there's lots of space in white, so it allows you to see clearly the 7 steps. So it's important to use the butcher paper in the right way, and it seems in this group they really took care of attention to that. The other thing I wanted to point out is that I see that there's a break. I tend to forget breaks so much in my workshops and the workshops that I design, and people always demand it, and at the end evaluate really bad when there's no breaks. I'm so glad that there was a 2.5-hour workshop, and you guys made a decision to have a break. So that's very important. It allows people to go to the bathroom, it allows people to have informal communications and then go back. So that's and rest and everything. So that's very important. It gives breathing time. It's just as important as having white stuff or white spaces on a butcher paper, so that there's some breathing space. The only thing I would do with the break is I think I would have it here before the solutions. Because if I go back to the logic that group did in terms of research, education, action, I totally see the research part here. Who are the participants? What are their problems in transportation? Their barriers? Reflections. Then we're connecting with the education piece, but it's connected to the research part. And then here's, so what do we do to solve it? So that requires a break first. I think for me it would flow better a break over here, but it all depends. If it's lunchtime, then you better break before. So I'm just thinking that I think a break before the solution mind frame is better than putting the break before the reflection, because you want it to flow. Just like the other group did the flowing in the reflection part, it's better. And the other thing I really loved, plus you guys had evaluated and the other group did too. The other group even went into feelings, which is really good. So evaluation is always good to contemplate. Sometimes you don't have time for it. So it's important. But I really like the fact that you convened a new workshop, a follow-up. So what happens with workshops is like they're unconnected to a process. They're not part of a process. The best educational events is when it's part of a process. So if it's only one workshop of 2.5 hours, you're not really going to do much of a change. But if it's part of a whole process of several workshops and talks and community meetings and all that, then it all makes sense because it's part of a bigger picture. So I really like the fact that it doesn't end here. It keeps on going. So that's the other observation I wanted to make. But very good work, and I really liked it. I would like to be in that workshop. Oh, by the way, the other thing I wanted to say is the drawings over here. I really like the fact that you could have an artist doing it. And when you can encourage some people to do their own is good because it develops the other hemisphere of thinking not only rational. So whoever wants to also add their drawings, and then you have the volunteer who draws better to do others who, like for me it's a little bit difficult to do my drawing, but even if I just do a stick and then give him the idea, it allowed me to work on my other hemisphere, which sometimes we don't use. So it's a psychological tool to go and use it a little bit more.
It's nice too because if you can see the drawings side by side, oftentimes when we do those little doodles on our paper, it stays in front of us, But when you see it side by side, you can really visually compare it to the other barriers or the same barriers that other people in the community are experiencing. You can be like, oh, that's my barrier too. Oh, I didn't even think of that one,
All right. Amy, and then
one of the other things that I really love about what y'all did, because one of my pet peeves, and I think this is what we talked about when philosophy and methodologies get divorced from each other, that I've seen a lot is people like, oh, we need a group energizer, we need to, and it's not completely disconnected from what you're trying to do. And y'all from the start, like from here to there, we're doing transportation. Yes, it was a way for people to interact, and it was an energizer, but it had meaning to the entire workshop. And I see that a lot. It's like people are like, oh, we need an activity here, we need an energizer here, and it makes no sense to the whole. And I think that's really missing out on sort of the steps of moving from a foundation and continuing to build throughout. And so I really like that y'all did that.
all right, Ethiopian.
I agree with what, well, I don't want to say agree, that's not what I'm saying. I was going to say what Amy said. And I agree that this workshop is very much needed in Asheville. If anyone knows about transportation here, you really, really need this. And I really did like the idea of the drawing as well. And you saying that, like, to shorten the time as well, like, I was like, wow, I never thought of using, something like drawing to help facilitate time management, and I just thought that was a great idea.
All right. Something else? Something that I liked about this group is that specifically they destined time for setting up the objectives. And once you were clear about those objectives, then you start designing the workshop. Yeah. And it's so difficult to do that. Sometimes we always have those discussions with Chavi. We always, she says yes, I say no, and it's like that all the time. But some way, somehow, we have been working for almost 20 years now. But one of the discussions that we always have is, are you going to write down the objectives? And I say, well, maybe not, because I think No, I think it's necessary. Okay, so I start writing the objectives, but once I finished the objectives, it's so easy. Pass to the agenda, to go through the design, it's so easy. It requires a lot of thinking, but once you have them, not so many. I would say that 3 or 4 objectives the most, and then you can start designing the workshop. So let's go to the last one, but
Who was part of group number 2? Raise your hand. Raise your hand, group number 2. Group number 2, we want to give you credit. There we go. All right. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So,
briefly?
Sure.
I've noticed that some of the interpreting equipment is randomly giving static. We can't figure out why it gives static at moments and other times not. So I would just want to know, did it make any difference? She was outside and I was inside. Did it work any different?
I didn't hear as much static.
Which way?
Medium, and Andrea, if you could come over here so you could see better. And I don't know who else. Julie, you have a good side there? Yeah.
So Ethiopia, do you remember the 3 steps? How you did it, the content, and then the questions and observations, right?
So, I'm up here representing group number 3.
Hello! Already, that's the workshop.
And so how we did it, we started with the 3 topics that were given, and our group had a very robust discussion of what we were going to do it on, and we kind of worked backwards in a way. Like we had something about human rights in place, and then we had an objective, and then we got further into the workshop, planning of the workshop, and we were like, hey, well, maybe we need to restructure what we're actually doing the workshop on. So we kind of did it around the way. But around the way is also good. So we came up with our objective. That's what we did. What am I doing again? Sorry. How we did it. So that's how we did it.
Yes, and now
the content. All right, so the content, as you can see here, we put our objective up there, which was to have the participants feel empowered to take action. And we would start out the workshop with an introduction or a kind of welcome. We would do an icebreaker, and one of the icebreakers that Meron was saying that she enjoyed was with people giving an adjective that also started with the first letter of their name, and how well it worked for her. I mean, if you were to ask her how well it worked for her, you can see it really worked for her. And so we were like, well, that sounds cool. We'll add that in there. So having an icebreaker to get to know each other, and then to go over the agenda for the day, just giving an overview of what are we here to do, that kind of thing. And then going into the research aspect of it, asking the group, what is women's labor rights? What is that? And creating a group definition for it, using an activity, and the activity would be saying, have you experienced a violation of your rights, or do you know someone who has experienced this violation of women's rights or labor rights? And getting that experience to guide the group in making the definition. So we were thinking of using small groups, 3 to 4 people, in order to do that. And there is what I just said. And then we would go back to the larger group to share the information that we received in the groups. And then we would move on to. Oh, sorry. Oh, right. So, and so doing that activity would also help us to come up with where people's passions lie, and help us to talk about what the issues are in women's labor rights. And then we were moving on to adding new info, the presentation aspect, but not presentation in the sense of like we're presenting to the group, but actually having the group kind of present information to each other. So we were thinking of using an activity like the knowledge basket. And so the knowledge basket, do you want to explain a little bit more about the knowledge basket for everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay in Spanish?
Yes, please, in Spanish.
Decidimos que la presentación, como había dicho Vicky, para que no sea tan... ¿Es that okay?
I'm just getting buzzed.
Yeah,
But keep going.
She's okay. I'm going to say English. So we were thinking that to do something. Here.
Did you change the battery? Did you try to get the battery?
In the transmitter?
In this one? Yeah, sometimes with the battery it's low instead.
Okay, so can I keep it? So in order to do something very dynamic, we do not choose to do a PowerPoint presentation. So instead of that, we come up with something called the knowledge basket, which is we're going to put some baskets with information about women's labor rights and some specific questions. So each basket has to do with one person. So everyone can go to these baskets and then they find information there and then they can share.
So, thank you. So, yeah, using an activity like the knowledge basket, and then checking for a knowledge transfer. So not only just having like people go and get the information and then talking about it, but like checking that there was some information transferred there. And so asking people if they agree or if they disagree, and to go around the room and ask people what did they learn? If did you learn anything from this experience with the knowledge basket? And then also we were also thinking of putting up a timeline of issues that pertain to women's labor rights, so that we can have something visual out for the group in regards to like the timeline and the history of women's labor rights. And so then we would have a break. So we have a break there, a quick little break. And then we are moving into the plan for action. So discussing with the group, what do we want to do? So now we've gone from, figuring out what our definition is of women's labor rights, talking about the issues, getting to know people's experiences with it, and then saying, so, what do we want to do with that? What do we want to do with, what is our action plan? And so that's what we would do, break back into groups and create action plans. And then each group would present what their action plan is. And then from that, we would move on to a time for reflection. And the time for reflection would talk about our hopes for the future. So we have, here's the issue, this is what we want to do about the issue, and this is what we hope to accomplish with the actions that we're going to do. This is what we hope to see. This is the change that we hope to see. And then closing with a song. Like having something that songs tend to, what I feel is, I like to sing. If anybody knows me, I really love singing in a group anyway, but one of the reasons why I love singing in a group, it's almost like group meditation or anything that's communal in a group. It's like all of this energy is getting put to this particular song, and how empowering is that, that you leave out feeling really rejuvenated and refreshed and ready for action, and you've learned a song. So, and closing with the song, and that's what we have for our group.
All right. Something.
Oh, the small sheet here?
No, over there. It's a bigger one.
Oh, the bigger
The
one.
spiral.
The spiral. So Becky came and drew this spiral of the popular education spiral, and this is what we actually used in planning the workshop. Like, we had already started a little bit, but then it was like, okay, well, let's make sure that we're touching on these specific principles in the workshop, so that we're that our method is really aligned with not just popular education. I don't want to say it just that it's aligned with popular education, but aligned with educating and educating people about the issues that concern them, and creating a motivation to act on it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some other comments from the same group participants?
Well, I love the look of your poster. Like, I love the graphic at the bottom and like the pictures at the top. I love that y'all wrote your objective out on the top of the sheet. That's something that I wish I had done. So, and I really like you guys gave long amounts of time to each of your sections. Because I think sometimes we tend to shy away from upwards of 30 minutes. If that was your average, and some was usually 40, 45, I think that's really great. Because it takes a long time to get into an activity and really be comfortable, and then do the activity and then take step back. Really strong.
And our group also wanted to do the evaluation of what we learned, like the form of I liked or I don't like, but in that sense, so that. But then we decided to be doing it in a group as going around, because we thought if we do that, we may not hear everybody's thoughts and ideas. So we thought a brief time of going around the room and finding each person's like or dislikes or what they've learned would stimulate other people's thoughts and come to an agreement that this is what our collective action could be.
Comments, questions? Nicole?
I like the idea of the knowledge basket, and I think I would love to see, I would like to see more information about that, like exactly how that works in practice, because that's a really cool concept, and I haven't heard of that before.
Me gustaría explicar en español, porque la idea de las canastas realmente es una actividad que hicimos con las mujeres cuando tenemos los workshops de violencia doméstica o agresión sexual. Cuando hablamos específicamente de cosas como leyes, cosas que son muy académicas y que realmente son cosas que yo no puedo decir esto es lo que yo les traigo, sino lo que yo también encontré. Entonces decidimos recolectar esta información limitándonos a nuestro objetivo y ponerlas en canastas, pero a la misma vez nos conectamos con personas que trabajan dando esos recursos. Entonces teníamos, por ejemplo, como unas 3 o 4 canastas y en cada canasta había una persona. Entonces las personas tenían como una lista de información o de cosas, preguntas relacionadas con el tema que iban a trabajar. Entonces la idea era ir y ellas hacer el searching y luego regresar y poder compartir lo que habían encontrado y poder un poco confrontar. Y lo hicimos porque algunas veces nos gustan mucho las presentaciones, pero algunas veces para algunas personas les resulta cansado el estar escuchando un texto largo. Entonces quizás es más un poquito interactivo, más o menos es la idea.
I just want to interject one thing that I failed to mention earlier, is with at the end, when we're talking about how are we going to take action, is that we would also provide information and how you can take action. So if it is well, there's a workshop going on here, or there's a rally over here, or these are ways that you can also take action, and then people can share whatever they know during that period as well.
Chavi, do you have any?
I have a question, or if someone from the group can explain the spiral, because I think it's very good, and maybe we could go over it, and then some comments.
I just drew it out because when we were talking about the different activities that we wanted to do and seeing like which order to do things in, I thought this might help us with the order of our activities, especially with the knowledge basket that's kind of adding new information, like, oh, should we do that at the beginning, or should we do that, when should we do that? So I've seen this drawn out as the popular education spiral, where you always start with people's experiences and look for patterns so that you start to see where experiences are similar and where there are differences. And then you can add new information, and that could be in a lot of different ways. And then the group can plan for action and then act and then evaluate and reflect. And that could be like within one workshop, or maybe like the transportation group, they were kind of like, this whole first workshop was almost like this, starting with people's experience and looking for patterns. And then their next workshop seemed like that was going to be adding new information, starting to plan for action. Maybe they were going to do some research. So that could be like a whole process and series of gatherings and workshops too. And then the equalized power dynamics is throughout the process.
All right.
Algo que me gustaría aportar acerca del espiral que compartió con nosotros Becky es que cuando se trata, por ejemplo, de armar una clase o un diseño metodológico de una clase, siempre pensamos en una metodología tradicional, ¿verdad? Pero algo que personalmente no me había puesto a reflexionar en esto es que cuando tomamos como guía el espiral de la educación popular, esa acción y ese deseo de hacer esto algo que ayude a transformar una comunidad y a que el movimiento corra, hace que sea realmente intencional. Entonces, es algo que realmente, personalmente me gusta mucho.
Okay. Thomas, you want to say? No? All right. So, the only thing I would like to comment about this group is that knowledge basket is something, at least to me, that is related with a concept that is behind our popular education workshops, that is the democratization of knowledge, so that our workshops should be democratic. And we haven't gotten that point yet, Chavi and I, because we facilitate participatory exercises and breakout groups, but we all, at the moment of giving more information in that cycle, we always go back to the PowerPoint presentation, the things we have prepared. But I like this concept of the knowledge baskets because all participants in the workshops could have something to share. The moment of knowledge is not concentrated on the facilitator, but also with the participants. So if we could advance in that perspective, I think it's even better, yes. Because there's still that distinction between the participatory exercises and then the theoretical part, and that's still very traditional. So I think we have to implement that strategy.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with that, the knowledge basket, and I'd love to see more if you have more written on the steps, because I would like to adopt it.
Realmente fue una idea que salió del grupo de mujeres, que no queríamos eso. Siempre vemos en las mujeres que sienten que cuando uno está enfrente somos las que sabemos. Y realmente lo que hacemos quizás es lo mismo que ellas y hacer un tercio. Entonces decidimos hacerlo juntos.
Yeah, no, it's really, really, really nice. So I just want to say that I think the spiral is very, very clear about the moments, and I just want to identify some of the research components in it, the pedagogical component in it, and the action component in it. So Starting with people's experiences, what is that? Research. Look for patterns. Research, but at the same time, overlaps with reflection, which is okay. That's when the hat of the researcher puts also the hat of the pedagogical person who's reflecting about the action or the research that collected. So there is an overlap here on this moment, and it's important. Add more information, we put the hat of an educator, right? So we gotta be pedagogical. We use the basket knowledge or whatever tool we could use so that the information is adding salt and pepper, but it's not the essence because the essence was here, right? So this should be the longest piece of time that we spend on, and this should be smaller, like Magali was saying. And that's always a challenge because of the tendencies that we have to give more of this. Plan for action. Obviously, what's that? Action. Confront power dynamics. It is actually the second moment. It's a reflection moment. Remember that we learn acting and reflecting on action. Acting, reflecting on action. So here, actually, the cycle it's a new cycle, kind of. You plan for action, you're reflecting again, but not leaving behind the power dynamics, which we tend to leave behind. This group addressed transportation and the power dynamics behind transportation. Here's their goal, their objective. So they had it really clear, and it's unveiling the oppressive systems that are there. So that has to be brought out. And if it didn't come up, you go back to it. Reflection here. Acting, obviously, again, right? Action. Equalize power. I don't remember. I don't know if Becky, did you explain this? What is this piece? I'm not sure.
It's kind of confront power dynamics. Just all during the process, trying to equalize power within your own group, the power dynamics that exist within your own group, and then the power dynamics that you're working in the context of.
Okay, all right, and then evaluation and reflect. Evaluation is actually going back to this, reflecting on it, and then starting a new cycle. So actually the steps are not so clear sometimes, and they do overlap, but what is important is that we kind of follow that logic. So whether it flows like in the first group, whether it's like here, explain on the logic they wanted to go through also, or whether it's explained in this graph, the idea is that throughout the workshop there is a logic. We call it the vertical logic of a workshop. That's what we call it. Teachers, when they plan their class, and Magali knows this, very well, because you know how in teaching school they teach you to draw the chart of a class, and you go, the objective is this, the topic is that, the procedure will be this, the method will be this, the resources will be this, the time, so that is the horizontal design of a class or of a workshop. And sometimes we're really good at that. We really know how to, it's kind of difficult to create the objectives, but we know we have to do it. It's hard to pick the activity sometimes. We know how to do it and how to assign the time and what resources we need. But sometimes we don't give time to the logic, the vertical logic, or the spiral logic. But if we don't do that, we're not really doing popular education, because we gotta always be clear. Are we departing from people's knowledge? Are we reflecting and getting some patterns clear on that knowledge? Are we adding a bit of information, because we do have a role as educators? Are we adding that? What is it gonna be that we're gonna be adding? Are we going back to practice and to action? So if that logic is not clear, that vertical spiral logic, then it's not there is no difference between our workshop and a typical banking class, a typical traditional class that our students are receiving in our schools.
I also wanted to mention that this concept of spiral is really profound. We're looking at it in a very, one-dimensional, really, almost from here. My husband says life is spiral. We start from bottom, we grow, we revisit. And if we don't grow out of that stage of wherever we are, we're going to revisit again. And you go up by this revisiting and gaining wisdom from this. So when you're mentioning, you go back and revisit that, confront power dynamics, or act on it, and then revisit again and reflect again and again. It's a life process of growth. You know, and you keep on coming and revisiting and going up. It's not a circle because you don't, in a circle you don't move, you don't go up. But in a spiral up, you grow and you go up. So it's a fantastic model, and just have to imagine, use our imagination, grow with it.
Algo muy chiquitito que para mí es importante, como participante, es importante el tiempo, porque he estado en unas actividades y trainings que quieren hacer uso de la práctica de educación popular, pero muchas veces la dosificación del tiempo no es tan buena que no se alcanza a todo el proceso. Entonces, cuando no hay tiempo para cada punto, realmente sentimos como que hay algo incompleto. Y en muchas de las cosas que he asistido a veces se quedan en las partes, la primera parte, segunda parte, que uno se siente, ok, vine, participé, hice la dinámica, dije lo que yo quería, pero no hubo esa parte, por ejemplo, de interactuar, de confrontar, de ver contenidos e información. Pues creo que es importante considerar el tiempo para dar oportunidad a que se cumplan todos los procesos.
¿Cómo se resuelve eso?
Dosificando el tiempo y también siendo realistas en nuestros objetivos, que fue una de las cosas que al inicio nos tomó bastante tiempo porque realmente el tema puede ser muy amplio, entonces es importante delimitar el tema y ver qué podemos hacer en función del tiempo que tenemos.
So, any comment to what Magali is saying? Because that's a very important point, and it happens to all of us who have led any workshop and facilitated any workshop. How do we solve that issue? Because we should finish the cycle, and sometimes there's no time. So, like for instance, today we have a lot of topics that we wanted to cover. We're not going to cover them, because if we do, then we're not going to finish the cycle. So you got to make decisions. I really like the decision-making piece that group had. There is constant decision-making prior to the workshop and then during the workshop, because you got to be, none of these agendas are stiff, are rigid. They have to be flexible, like Moran was saying, because you don't know if at this point on the break you need a, what do you call it, facilitator? Huddle? Yeah, because there might be a chance that this is not making sense the way you had planned it, and you got to reassess. For instance, we had an event with CPC maybe a month and a half ago or so.
Here in this same place.
My God, we had a whole agenda, a toolkit, and everything. And right before lunch, and it was a 2-day agenda. Okay, so half of the first day, and all of a sudden the workshop seemed it wasn't making any sense. Not the methodological process that we had proposed. The road, like Reca said before, right? El camino that we had proposed was not working. And you're right there with the people. What do? Look, you gotta huddle, but you gotta figure out and make decisions really, really quick. It's not easy. It's not easy, and you gotta readjust, and you gotta be flexible, like Moran said. So it's very difficult. And sometimes what we do is we put too much content. That's the problem. And content should not be the focus. And it's a mistake we make all the time. So that's why we end up not finishing the cycle. Because we wanted to cover too many topics, and then we don't end it. We don't end the cycle. Less is more. Menos es más. Because you go deep. You could go deep. So if we only have 2 hours and a half, we're not going to have 3 topics. Maybe we just address one, and that's the first workshop. Next workshop, we address another one, right? So, but that is a decision. So we're always making decisions, and Magali was saying, and they have to be intentional. So we gotta be like very clear about that. So I wanted to mention two more. I'm sorry, Amy.
I was just gonna say one of the things, the great things that I've learned, and we were talking, Rika and I were talking about that this morning, is trust the room. Trust who's there, trust the room, and trust your gut.
And
trust your gut.
Your gut.
In the room. Because I think a lot of times we come in with this agenda and we, and I've done it myself and I've seen it done, and it's like, come hell or high water, I'm moving through that agenda, and it doesn't matter what's happening in the room. It doesn't matter what my gut's telling me, and that's completely
wow. I like that.
The wrong direction. So you have to and sometimes we over-prepare because we don't trust the room. We don't trust that it's going to be there when we get there, and it's going to unfold the way it should. And trust in our gut to be able to read that and feel that. And I know from my education that I was taught away from that. It took me probably 20 years to get back to learning to trust the room and the people in the room, as opposed to, I've got to prepare for days, and I've got to memorize it, and I've got to write it down, and I've got to say it just like I wrote it down. And what happens is that you're not with the room at all. You've missed the whole point of it.
Yeah.
And
So trust the room and trust
your gut.
Yes, Magali.
Algo que me gusta mucho que muchos facilitadores hacen es preguntar por sus expectativas. De tal forma ellos también pueden tener la oportunidad de ser sinceros y de conversar, este es el tiempo que tenemos, esto es lo que traigo para compartir con ustedes. Entonces pueden tener esa.
Yeah, very good point. For instance, this is the moment where to do it. The expectations brainstorming is right before the agenda. So if Calvin says, I expect to get from the workshop this, and then Darcel says, I expect this, and then Nicole says this, and you're like, that's not our agenda. So you go and you explain your agenda and you say, we will cover what Darcel wanted, we will not cover what Calvin wanted, but we could have another workshop. Yeah, leave the door. But it's very, very important. I was going to say, I really like that you go over the agenda, because you're giving power and information to the participants. It's not like a blind way, and you're there trusting with the facilitators, but you got to figure out what are the topics going to be about. What are we going to be covering? So that's very good, because you give control of the information of what's going to be happening, at least the most important one. So, but before doing it, expectations.
Can I say something related to that? Yes. I think it's good to share the agenda, but in general, that's why we always produce a program and the agenda. The agenda is only for us and for the people who have invited us, for them to know the details in terms of the breaks and lunch and all that. But we only share the program because, especially here in the United States, if you give the agenda to people, they're going to be counting the minutes and, but we're not supposed to be on this part, we should be on the other part.
They get nervous.
Oh my God, they get nervous. So just a general program of the topics that...
The topics and the main words, lunch, where's break, where's this other topic and that. Because if not, they get like, you're right, that's a very good point, Rebecca.
And it's a popular education, which means we all participate, and that flexibility can't be there if people are expecting certain things, especially if they're stiff and they can't be flexible. Then, they're not listening. Then all of a sudden you lost your audience.
Yeah. Okay, there's up.
I want to share, I understand when you share the agenda, and I understand the hesitancy of actually allowing us to participate in changing the agenda or in looking at it, and also the time around it. But what I have found in taking that risk, it is what Amy says, trust the room and trust the people who are there, because I believe that and I have been working for a number of years of sharing the agenda and then coming back in and checking in, like maybe at the break, check in and say to the group, this is all the time we have, and so what is gonna be important that we move forward with, and what is it that we're not, and then it's just not gonna happen. So, and it's a piece of control I have found, and so I would question all of us to look at the part of the control that we want to control, because I believe that actually keeps us from being invested in the process, especially in learning and the knowledge base.
Yeah, so what you're saying is there is a piece of control that we should always have in a way, but there's some that we could give away and open up to flexibility.
Right, because you're the facilitators. We trust that you're going to facilitate us in a workshop, but we also trust that we have investment in the agenda after looking at it, and that we trust that we're going to leave there happy and know that we made the decision oh, we're going to take this piece out. We collectively made that decision. So when we evaluate, some may like things, some may not, but
that's a really good point. Nicole, on that?
I think that I totally agree with that, and I think I can't say how many times I've prepared a whole agenda and a whole process for moving toward a very particular objective, and then gone into community, for example, and ended up throwing out the entire agenda. I mean, everything on it just goes out the window because what is important to that group, what's important to that room needs to have the space and the air to breathe and to have that type of discussion. So it may be that the objective isn't even the right objective. It might be that actually the topic that's most important to the people there is something like, we're not even there yet. First, we need to come up with this over here. We can't just fly through this, And so I think it's also important to know, trust your room and also know your room. Are you going into a group of professionals who have that very linear training of point to point to point to point, and then typically there's not going to be a whole lot of variation from the agenda, and you can probably kind of just move through it. Or you're going into a community of folks who maybe don't have that same kind of experience or training, and so be willing to just throw it all out the window and just flow in the way that the group wants to flow. Otherwise, you'll lose everyone. You'll lose everyone in the room.
Or in spaces where people don't usually have a chance to. There's not usually a forum for people to talk about those things, and so they're just we need to talk about this now. But it's true that objective might totally change. And I like the way that you handled it yesterday when we started having a dialogue. That me and E.T. were oh my gosh, we're totally awake. We don't need a break now. That dialogue was so rich, But you said, this is taking us away from our agenda, and you acknowledge it and say if you have to say we might have to cut something else out, but that's okay, and just acknowledge that. So it's you're not putting the responsibility all on yourself or the group. It's just this clearly needs to happen, but also knowing as a facilitator when to start wrapping it up to lead it into the next part of whether it's part of what's cycle is completing. Exactly, yeah. So you're moving towards that bigger goal, because it is the responsibility of the facilitator, to make sure that that everyone's needs are getting met, kind of,
Yeah, because
that's a big role.
I feel with this one workshop that we do a lot on multilingual work and training interpreters, there's a whole lot of analysis on privilege and oppression and what has brought you to be bilingual to allow you to be an interpreter. And it pushes everybody's buttons, and there's always a white person in the room who's crying because it's the first time they've dealt with their privilege, and they want to take the whole morning to deal with it. And so when you're the facilitator, you have to know when the change in the agenda is only happening because a couple of people are making it about themselves, and when it truly is something that the whole group is going to benefit from. And so it requires this kind of and I think that's why it's always good when you kind of facilitate with a co-facilitator, because then you can kind of be doing the checking in. And I think too, it's always a good idea if you're varying from the agenda to check in with the group and say, is this important and how much time do we want to take for it? And then once we reach that time, really cut it there and go back to the agenda. If the group has said yeah, we want to do some discussion, but we also want to reach these goals, so we're going to come back.
Great point. Very good point. So,
and the important thing is to remember that we gathered for a topic. And I think that always is a great facilitation skill. Is remember you came here to do this, even though we got off, but we need to stay focused on that.
Awesome. Very, very good, and we really appreciate it. This group, I wanted to say one more thing. Timelines are awesome. Timelines gives historical analysis, so that raises our level of awareness. Remember yesterday? Raises to the critical level. So if we could do that in another workshop, it could be participatory. So that way it takes time, but it's with the people, or through the basket kind of way. But if it's constructed with them, it really stays in our minds, so it will be there. Not as an add of more information, but as a what do they know about the timeline of women's rights? And then you add more. You add the gaps. What's missing? You just add those pieces of the history that are missing. Maybe it could be another beautiful workshop in terms of women's rights. And then Ethiopia's point about singing. I'm just going to end with that because I think I love the singing in workshops. I think the South is so full of that tradition. In the immigrant rights, we're not singing enough. And I really think it would give that connection with our spirits, because we are mind, hearts, and spirits. And the causes that we're in require spirits. Yes. If we're not in touch with the spirits and only with the rational, we really don't go inward. We have to go inward. So I really want to reiterate your point about the singing, and I really love to close it that way. We could do it now, but I'd rather you prepare a nice song to close. So I would not ask you to do it like I usually do with Becky, because I have like confianza with her, but I will ask you to help lead the end of our workshop with a nice song that gives us that connection to spirit. And let's just have a break now, because we've learned from all the groups that it's important to break. So 10-minute break. You can help us with the time and help us to remind us 10 minutes. Mehan, you did very good. You want to do it again? Sure. Okay, great. Miranda, right, time. The break, go to the bathroom, get up, and awesome work.